Legal cannabis was a $10 billion industry last year, and experts say it's going to be worth over $20 billion by the end of next year. And the big question is this: how do normal people like us, who aren't part of the 1%, how do we take the money in our pockets and participate in the largest transfer of wealth? My name is Charles. I'm joining Roz McCarthy and Eric Range. And in this episode of Canna Talk with Roz, we explore cultivation as a business, how to succeed in the green rush, and look for those answers.
When we talk about education, let's talk about for the person who wants to get into the industry but wants to understand the industry standards and not be in the underground area. What are some of the schools or the educational training, courses or what have you that you've heard about, Jamal, or maybe you've heard about, Josh, so that we can share that with folks to be able to tap into from an educational perspective?
Gary, go ahead, or I can comment on that as well. Personally, in what you guys have focused with Oaksterdam, they've been around for quite a while. They've had a chance to kind of refine what they're doing. They are obviously they're an education that is a paid education. I say everyone needs to try to get as much education they can, as from all sources that they can. So as far as a school, Oaksterdam is very good on that. What I did was I kind of didn't have that opportunity, so I looked at community colleges for biology courses, or if I wasn't in full-time school, I would look at just different facets that I would see in business, business courses, economics courses, simple biology courses. And Oaksterdam has had the chance over this amount of legalization, these many years that we have between Oregon and California in the medical world. They've had a chance to kind of refine that. And I'd say, as looking at their curriculum, they basically cover what you need. And it's a not very expensive curriculum.
What about you, Jamal? Any
I'll let someone else comment on that as well.
But what about you, Jamal? Anything that you can comment on?
Well, there's a lot of institutions of learning, and I would always tell people to enhance first with nursery skills and then learn a certain basic understanding of the plant, its aptitudes, where it's being grown, how it's being grown, and sometimes it's regional. Sometimes, it's right where you are in California. You might have to have some more adverse conditions versus North Carolina. So I'd always say community college and start with nursery training, because I don't advise anyone to jump into cannabis unless you have a well-rounded education on, growing plants, keeping those alive first, and then you move into something, more dynamic, because, when I came up, community college was good, but then they had Oaksterdam, and then sometimes you'd study under people like Dr. Green Thumb up in Ottawa. That's what I did. I jumped in my Volkswagen, went up to Canada and stayed up there for 2 or 3 summers shoveling dirt before I even touched the seed. So, so really at the end of the day, Oaksterdam is a really good domestic, learning institution. Then you have the Cleveland School of Cannabis, and then you have some other ones that are out there. But Roz, to be exact, there is no real specific school to go to. But I've seen people that were African cichlid handlers. These are some of the best nursery technicians out there. They're more apt to grow in cannabis than some, master grower, so really I do think it's based in, the natural training first, and then the understanding of cannabis.
Yeah, that immersion is very important. If you can get it no matter where, the immersion training is going to be especially on the cultivation side. You can learn laws, you can learn things by the book, but when it really comes to the hands-on is, if you can get that, and a lot of people start with volunteering, and I'm not suggesting that people don't get paid for what they do, but in a lot of areas, volunteering at these nurseries, it doesn't have to be a cannabis nursery. In a lot of ways, there may not be an actual paying job, but you can spend a weekend or 2 a month volunteering at these places, and you will end up shoveling some dirt around, of course, but with that comes learning about that dirt and what's so important in that dirt. It has its own ecosystem in itself. So.
No, I think.
Let me ask you guys a question, and Josh, you may be the best to answer this from an internal standpoint when it comes to an organization that is vertically integrated. So in a state like Florida, where we have vertical integration, how many cultivation positions are even available at a vertically integrated, company? Because this is the other part of it. I try to get people to be very realistic about the opportunities that are there. And, to be honest, we're not going to have 1,000,001 VP of cultivation jobs out there. And so, sometimes, and I know this from my background with education, sometimes, in order to keep labor costs down, we have too many people qualified for the job. And so that we have a large pool of applicants. But,
Yes.
Give us some real numbers about, in terms of, like, here in Florida, we have 14 license holders, all vertically integrated. If we just took one of those, how many positions are we talking about in just the cultivation side?
And of course, that question can be answered in terms of scale. How big are the facilities, this and that. What you're very true on about, with this market comes saturation very fast. We did, like I was saying earlier, we had the chance in Oregon, the opportunity to spend 20 years before anything really became saturated. So it was a lot different. And now that we've got businesses that are planning for states that haven't legalized yet, that are planning to legalize, we are going to have a lot more big business entering right away, it looks like. And from that, their initial thought is, okay, I'm going to grow, or I'm going to start a dispensary. I'm going to grow cannabis, I'm going to cultivate cannabis and sell it, or I'm going to start a dispensary. And those are the first go-tos. And I like to sometimes refer to I don't have any statistics behind it, but you hear the statement that more money was made in the gold rush off of selling shovels than off of selling the gold, or off of mining the gold itself. So I find it's very important that people, look beyond, and I would never discourage somebody to try to, or to, take their hand at growing cannabis, and they're going to want to do that as far as their education and have that.
I want to transition a little bit. We got a slide up, and it talks about cannabis cultivation as a business. And we wanted to touch on this before we go into some other parts, because we have areas like Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Missouri now. They have just passed Amendment 2, where they're going to have a medical marijuana program there. What can you say to small business owners, maybe farmers, who are hoping to be able to compete for one of those licenses? The infrastructure of your team, if you're going after a cultivation license, Jamal and Joshua, can you talk about what that team looks like in order to, how do you decide if you're doing your infrastructure, your grow, your scientists, your water filtration? I mean, talk about some of the things they need to consider when they talk about this as a business, and also the cost that is a part of that.
Would you like me to comment, or anyone else is free as well?
I can hear you, Joshua. I can address first if you want, if you'd like. Basically, when you're dealing with these different states and they're coming online, obviously they have a lot of different options of how you want to come into the grow and how you want to structure your team. Anytime I go into a state, I want to make sure that I've done a demographics, I've done a social acceptance study, and then I try to have a lot of people on ground that's been, involved in the economy, because you want to create some sort of economic team. And it's like a management team to manage the situation that you come up against. And so you want to have a master grower, obviously someone who can hit the ground running. Then you want to have someone who's an executive contract person, and then you want to have someone who's good at, negotiations and sales, estimating. And then you want to have someone who's good at, the lighting, the electrical. And then that's when you're bringing a consultant that can obviously get you the lighting at no cost, because you can get it subsidized depending on how large the footprint you want to grow, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, just depends, but, you have consultants that come in and bring in, different types of lighting that are at no cost to the client. that you could pay when you start making money, and or just as long as you don't make a huge footprint, I think they grant you the lights for a period of time. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, but in the long run, you know, the number one thing you want to have on your team is someone who's seasoned, who's been in the industry, who is not a guru, but someone who knows all about all of these processes to oversee all of this at one time, like a project manager type person that's a consultant. And reluctantly, a lot of people never hire a project manager or someone who knows about this because they want a shortcut and says, oh, we're just going to throw some lights up, put some plants in the ground, we're going to grow some marijuana. And then they have this company that's huge and large, but their product is subpar, and they turn out like madmen, no pun intended.
No, I fully understand. The team that you're talking about is very important, and that learning how to build those relationships with, as you're talking about vendors, and the comment on the lighting is very important. When using more efficient lighting, you definitely can get a lot of money back. Some of it may be completely funded, as you say, to where you don't ever have to pay a certain amount, and then some of it can be put back onto the purchase of those lights. And that's getting fairly specific. I just think that it is very important to have that cannabis guy that's been in that for many years. But at the same time, and that's where a lot of us, and this is a reason why I joined with Kaya Farms, Kaya Holdings, Kaya Shack. We have we have the dispensary side as well. But the reason I joined with them is because I needed a team around me, being a cultivator for many years, that had that business side of that business sense and that ability to, kind of push us that direction as well. And with that, I was able to then say, okay, I've got these years of cultivation experience. Now I can apply that and learn from these guys. So with building the team, is that, you're right, is that guy that kind of has all the business as well as some cultivation skills. You want to always have the ability to communicate, amongst each other, and not have someone say, maybe, but it's very important to have that both aspects.
Absolutely. So I'm putting this, I'm being really specific about this conversation because I'm prepping people also from a financial standpoint. Anybody want to talk about financially? What does that look like? We are talking about fees for permitting. Even now we have countries outside of the U.S. in Africa and Colombia. I've gotten 3 phone calls about Colombia, so I don't know what's going on in Colombia. So anyone that knows about Colombia, tell me, because I've gotten 3 phone calls about cultivating in Colombia. But in Jamaica, if someone says you need $2 million to cultivate in Africa, is that realistic? Do you need $2 million to cultivate in the States? I mean, how's that look from a financial standpoint?
I work international on some projects, and I go back and forth in Belize, and I've been looking at stuff in down south and speaking to a few other clients about being in the Caribbean and in Africa, and especially down in Bogota, down in Colombia. Everyone wants funding, everyone wants to be able to get into the race, but at the same time, their government are like, okay, you can do it, but there's no real paperwork behind it. So I've talked to a few constituents that are down there actively growing, but they have the permission to do it. And trust me, I mean, they're actually doing some pretty remarkable stuff because they've got so many phenotypes of cannabis in each community that's been isolated to where they're on a pheno chase that's like it's for champions. And so right now, yeah, the Europeans are really ahead of the Americans right now. If we're talking about the Olympics of cannabis, the Canadians are ahead of the Americans right now a little bit, and so it puts us at a standpoint where we're here in our domain, but when we start reaching out to other community, no one wants to really invest in going down south. And being down south, you have some things about government that frighten people, which inhibit them to want to be able to invest. But there's friendlier countries that need, sustainability projects that can really, impact the community. And so there's certain things of, hey, do we have the UN approval? When they say, hey, the UN reclassifies it, then that's going to bring in a lot more funding. I mean, let's be realistic about it. Once they reclassify that, Roz, then other countries will say, okay, well, that means we want UN protection. We want to go in and start having these subsidized crops that can bring in trillions of dollars, because now they're making this nano material or these new subsidized materials, putting them in BMWs for the small community because they're doing it at a substantial rate, you know. And then there's people like us that create this super seed now that can exist with virtually nil to none water. And so that we're creating this infrastructure of cannabis right as this is going along, but we need these courageous angels to invest in us and these ideas, because that's our future, is the ideas of what we want to do. Because it's not so much as what the plant can do, it's what can't that plant do, you know. And we have to take the risk of saying we'll put money into it, but we have to base these projects on realistic terms. We have to create something that's going to monetize. And at the same time you're monetizing, there's a research and development level to your business model. And then on your business model, there's still inclusion to other farmers that you can be involved in with your business model that are hurting. And you say, well, yeah, I know you got land, we've got funding, where your soil's good, we're going to go ahead and put our plantlets in there. Once they mature, we'll see you every 40 days. Then you have a truck rolling out, putting out, you know, 15,000 plantlets, you know, every 2 or 3 weeks, you know, when this stuff starts to mature in our labs. And so that creates, you know, inclusion, but that creates sustainability to where there's an interdependence upon each other. So at the same time, internationally, it takes some cooperation, but I do believe it's feasible with the right coalition of minds behind it. Joshua, myself, we have an investor, we have a strong team. We've got Eric for project management. We've got Roz for all the media coverage, all the analytics and everything, and the real time, what's going on. And so we go into a community, we can really impact them by saying, okay, we're the influencers. We want to make this available to you. And so how do we do it? So all you have to do is say yes and sign here. And then from there, we take them through, you know, the stages of development.
To follow up on that, Jamal, you know, say for instance, I had a project, I'm ready to go down, ready to get started, but I know I need funding. Maybe I have, you know, a little bit in my own, and I think I can get it done on my own. But maybe I don't. Maybe I need to raise some money. You know, we have a lot of people in our group who listen out and they say, you know, listen, I got a few dollars. I may have, you know, 150K that I'm willing to put towards this or whatever. Is that enough? Do I need more? How much if I wanted to start on, say, 20 acres and get going, you know, what is the range of what I need? And obviously, you know, I know how difficult it is to answer that question because there's so many variables that could really, you know, dictate and take that in so many different directions. But let's just say we were doing bare bones, only what was, you know, required, not really trying to be innovative, not really trying to, you know, take over the game. Just, I got my little 20 acres. I want to put, you know, some seeds in the ground, or I want to put some plantlets in the ground. You know, what type of money am I looking at to even get going?
Let me tell you, and you'll notice a bit of ambiguity when we answer those type of specific questions because there is so many variables. There is definitely a place, I believe, in the industry for any size player, and with that comes the fact that you know, I just have the money. But, you know, and even if it is $100,000, I say that's a fair amount to invest into something. I mean, a lot of us got started for less. With the licensing and the legalities, you know, that always becomes more. The barriers to entry in each area are different, you know, as far as, you know, what licensing itself even costs. You know, in Oregon, the barriers were very low. It was $5,000 to get into the top tier here. The tier 2 up to, you know, 10,000 indoor square feet, $5,000. In some states we're hearing, you know, that they're about $100,000 or $50,000 just to get your license. So that's one reason why we don't, you know, like to address specific figures. But like I say, with a smaller amount of money, then comes, you know, kind of a more tactful approach to where you're always going to want to create a strategy and an approach. But if you're trying to get into the game with less money, I shouldn't say game, into the business, less money, I would say you want to really focus on as much or more than large companies as where your target audience is, or your target market is, what your product is going to be, and who it's going to appeal to. And I think, if someone were to want to, and I'm just trying to keep this within the state lines right now of the United States. We were asking about approaching other countries, and as Jamal stated, that's a little bit complicated at this point. But
I'll tell you this, even though it's complicated, we have to think globally, and there's countries that are predominantly people of color who we do not want, and I will say this, we do not want the Canadian, European countries to go to these countries that look like us and then go and utilize the land to create crop and create product, and they're not doing the give back. Like, we shouldn't be saying to volunteer your time, in my opinion, for cultivation. We should be offering internships, paid internships, to allowing a talent pipeline of our young people to understand the ins and outs of cultivation. So, and I'm with you, Joshua, but we do have to kind of keep our eye on what's happening in some of these countries, because Jamal is from Belize. We have, Eric's family is from Jamaica. We have, Nicole Bafong, her company, her family's from Trinidad. She's our regional market director for the Caribbean. So we have some ties there, and I want us to stay really on point and watching what's happening from outside of the U.S. Standpoint.
Yes, forgive me if I sounded like I wasn't thinking that. Mainly when I said I was focused, and I meant my monetary mind and the thought of the way the cost structure works. It was focused.
No, I got you. I was just saying that for our audience, because I understand exactly where you were coming from, and it's true. But also because I literally, Jamal, I received either 2 LinkedIn messages and 1 phone call about Colombia. And so they were asking for funding. And I said, what for? And they wanted for production, and they wanted for cultivation. And I said, hey, are you registered as a business in Colombia? And do you have a license? And they don't. They're still trying to get upstart money. And so you have people that are still trying to figure out in these foreign countries how to get a license and how to get your permit. The first thing that you would need to do is, just like you have to register your business here in the States, you have to have a registered business in these foreign countries as well. So some of that basic stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, like, you guys don't have this. So, I don't know. I know that's outside of what's happening in the U.S., but I do know that people are interested in what's going on globally. And I do believe this. I had a interview with a news outlet yesterday, and they want to know, what do you think with all the bills from a federal perspective? I agree. The first thing that we should think about is, if we declassify this plant, it opens up a wealth of opportunity just with that one bill by itself. And you guys, if you want to weigh in.
Well, I completely agree. And federal legalization in the United States, it needs to happen. And obviously, it's not going to be too much longer. I don't think, maybe 2-3 years tops. But and that's just a prediction that I wouldn't. Don't hold me to it. But I want to go back to what you said earlier about other countries and helping out, and kind of making it theirs rather than the corporation that is trying to just capitalize on whatever. And of course, I come from a corporation, but we're not. Our culture isn't that. Our culture is to try to expand in a way that would be cohesive and involved with communities as well. So I believe that what you're saying is absolutely true as far as globalization. I think the large expansions are going to create some of what you talked about, with large maybe companies that just don't really have a vision, kind of. But I think with that, as the people that we are, and starting what we're starting now, is we can kind of try to change a little bit of that, or as much as we can, maybe helping people to figure out, how they would research their own or their education, because I believe everyone should just immerse themselves in the laws and figuring out what those laws are and what they mean to everybody else. So that is.
I agree 100%.
Yes.
Jamal, I got a slide up, and it's about the cannabis cultivation consultant. And this is a segue, an important segue, because the consultant, and that's what your business. And I want you to talk about the LA Cannabis Club, how you've consulted. We actually gave you a shout out, Black Excellence in Cannabis. Saw a video of you consulting a grower that was in Washington State, I think. But talk about when we talk about the ecosystem of cultivation, sometimes you don't have to know it all, but sometimes there are consultants out there. How do you know when to pick the right consultant? What's the price point to have a consultant that's really good to get on your team if you're going after a license? And if you can share just some of their areas of expertise, from grow method to cultivation method to product development, production and efficiency. What's that person? What should one expect from a cannabis cultivation consultant?
Hey, Roz. I would say that usually when it comes down to the consultants, when you're dealing with people, I mean, you want to have, the experience and the business acumen of knowing exactly, what product development is, and then what product efficiency is, what cultivation method is, and then what grow method is, and understanding which person wants to do what and how, and what their budget dictates, because the question you had earlier, you asked how much is it going to cost to cultivate an acre, in hemp. For me, doing it right, probably for the beginner, maybe $5,000, because he's only going to fit less than 3,000 plants on that property. 2,700, maybe 3,000, depending on your spacing between 4 and 6 feet. So wanted to cover that for people that are listening, and that's for your southern states, for people that are actually listening that want to know. Okay. All right. Now, when it really comes down to product development, you have people that come to you with ideas. They don't have a method of growing cannabis. They don't understand anything about it, but they says, hey, I want to get this product. For people that's involved in that, we could do white labeling, and we take them to people that are like Josh or somebody that's already growing that can say, hey, can we put a white label? Can we get a contract or a agreement with you, a consultant's agreement? So I'll get the agreement with him, and that agreement states that I could bring somebody to him under the right constraints that can work and be able to acquire flower from him on paper, pay tax, and be able to put it in stores. Now, there could be product placement with him, but there should be some sort of arrangement for, profit sharing and then net profit. And then, when you talk about cultivation in the main frame of it, I get a lot of people that want to come in and they want to grow soil, or they want to grow hydro, because some people say, hey, I want this type of marijuana. And so the way you start the cannabis, it's either going to be hydroponic to get this finished approach or get this finished bag appeal, or it may be soil. I've heard people tout and says, okay, I can grow soil and it comes out like hydroponic. And some people have that genome, that type of gene, that strand or that cultivar, that comes out exactly the way it does every time. I don't care if you grow it in soil, water, hydro, it has a certain effect. Some of it may be a little fluffier, but it's still roundabout, kind of may perk the THC or CBD a little bit in it, depending on the feeding cycle and how much you feed it. And I prefer, using hydroponics when we're doing large grows, because it keeps your hygiene level down, to where you don't have to clean as much. But you do have to have people involved that are going to be, eyes, keeping an eye on feeding tubes, making sure all the tubes are clean, making sure your reservoirs are clean, making sure there's no algae involved. I started growing cannabis when I was 10. And I get around a lot of people and their heads get so big on cannabis, and we forget that we have to keep those basic. It's almost like a basic triangle. We talk about combustibility with engines or whatever. Plants need light, water, and soil, and so we make sure that we try to keep sure that we can specify those three things, and we try to focus in on that light, and we dial in on that triangle. And you can really flay that thing out. And then you can go into your water, and you could really just nano that water, or really fill that water with oxygen and nutrients, and that uptake to where it just completely just makes that water like Sonic Boom, Street Fighter. So at the end of the day, and then when you look at your soil, cannabis in different types, depending on what Josh has bred and what he's created to become, he says, hey, it needs a little more girth in the soil. I need more nutrients, my man. I can't have too much air uptake. It's got to remain a little bit more moist. I need some more dark matter in it because this thing is a beast. It likes to eat, you know? And so when you pull it up out the soil, it's just got clumps of dirt and all kinds of stuff on the roots because it's alive. It's really attaching to this stuff, you know? So cannabis and growing it, and when you start talking about these different, these spheres of operations, a lot of people get intimidated when they see, you know, someone like Josh walk in. He's talking about all these operational fears, and it's like, hey, man, I just wanted to grow a little pot, you know. And it's you know, and he's like, oh, it's not that hard. Let me just take you through the factory,
right?
Because the same thing that he has in his factory location, we could have in our garage at home. It's just Josh took the broad approach and says, you know, I wanted a pair of Nikes, but I'm just going to go ahead and buy the estate instead. You know what I'm saying? So he just goes in and he just puts up, you know, 15,000 plants, and he's going nuts because it's just like it's good cultivars, they're strong, but he emphasizes the nursery care of that plant because without the nursery, none of this is going to happen. You know, and so that's the part about being a consultant is being able to bond with each and every person on that level of where they care and where they should adequately focus their attention on their endeavor. That's just what I'm good at. You know, I see people.
And you are damn good. You are good, my friend.
and I was going to say, what I heard from all of that was, listen, there are people out here who are passionate about certain parts of this, you know, ecosystem, who know their stuff. And as we said before, you don't have to be the expert. You might be an expert in choosing personalities to work with and choosing people to bring onto your team.
Yeah.
And if they don't speak with the same passion that Jamal and Josh bring when it comes to caring for that plant, if they don't speak of it like they would if it were their cat, you know, getting sick, and what they would do, if they don't have that level of passion, you need to keep moving and go to the next person because that's not the one you want on your team, right?
Because I want him on my team. So listen, this is a good segue because I got something to run by you, and so this is for you, Josh, because we're starting to see, and I think there's an opportunity. You're going to process, right? And you're cultivating right now in Oregon, and you're going to be a processor. And so with processing, that means you make products, you might make edibles and things of that nature. How open is Kaya Holdings to doing deals with individuals that they may have something They could be, because I got someone in mind, they got a great brand, a great concept, but they need a partner. They need someone that says, listen, I like what you're doing. I want to bring that in-house and we create this product and we profit share. Are you open for that? And if you have, what's some of your experiences in doing this? And it's the white label project that, you know, Jamal spoke about.
Right, sure, and that's a great idea. At this point, in ramping up, we've been utilizing people that already have kind of a business model in stuff like that with vendors that we actually use in our dispensaries as far as putting products on the shelves. So as we approach that ourselves, I think that
you got any black-owned businesses a part of that yet?
No, but I'd love to. Oh, as far as our vendors?
Yeah.
I can't answer that exactly, but I'm not sure. So I think that should be a goal that we could change that together, right?
Let's change that together.
Change that together.
We got to show examples of how a Kaya Holding and some of the major cultivation and the major processors are, they are, you don't even have to seek the vendors out. Come to M4MM. We have folks here that have products from an ancillary product standpoint, but we have folks that have an edible line that they have this recipe that's awesome. But besides the recipe, they have a brand that would blow your mind away. That would just you go, wow, I could really do something with that.
We want to hear about them, definitely. I think it's a wonderful idea, and you know, using your resources as well as ours, I think that'd be a wonderful way to approach this. Our CEO would probably love it. We've kind of got a credo for our company that we want to go outside just being the company that sells cannabis, you know, and a lot of that is, and it's on you'll see it on our website and our About Us, is that we believe that this should be a community thing, that we should involve and engage. So I really think that'd be great. exactly what you said with vendors and with people with ideas, and even figuring out ways that works. I mean, obviously not everyone's going to be in Oregon, but if someone has a recipe that they want to share with us that just may just not share with us, go into business with us together with.
Exactly. It's what Jamal said. So Jamal's point was that you have folks that may have the concept of a product and you white label, yes. They need you to process it, and yes. You have revenue share.
Right.
You may even front them on the packaging or whatever, but whatever it is, everybody decides on whose role is to roll this product out, because the end game is that you want a product rolled out. And my thought is that if you have dry states like Georgia, Mississippi, and South Carolina, but if you reside there and you have a product idea, how cool would it be to go to the West Coast, get your product going, start building yes. a brand out there, and then once Georgia comes online, now you find yes. a processor in Georgia, and
yes.
you doing is flipping it. But you, as the person that gave them a shot from the beginning, you yep. get a chance to be able to share in that revenue as well. And
it's a wonderful idea. A wonderful idea that we should expound upon together. How's that?
All right,
Josh.
I got it.
Hey, Josh, I had something I wanted to state that really could economically boost each situation that Trump did, and it's a loophole. Okay. And I wanted to let you know that now that hemp is federally legal, they have craft hemp right now. And there's yes. a lot of people exploiting this loophole by setting up CBD dispensaries. And for everyone that's listening, if you want a dispensary in your town right now, all you have to do is go in, get a business license, and then basically go out, get your CBD, and you can start doing flower sales. Now, you can do it over the counter because it's federally legal now. So
right.
if you want a dispensary, as long as they send that hemp over state lines with federal paperwork that has its COA, it has the amount of THC and the CBD in the hemp. If you've got $50,000 and you want to open a dispensary in your town, you can open a dispensary and your line will be out the door. That's called sustainability, because that's what Trump did. He's not going to signal and say, hey, now hear this, hemp flower is smokable. You take your innovation, go down the street, go grab Joshua and Jamal, go open a dispensary, because surely we'll open it for you. We'll make sure that it's lawful because we understand the state guidelines. We understand the Secretary of State, making sure that we can do whatever is federally legal in the guidelines to further our cause for minorities for medical marijuana, because people deserve access.
Yeah.
That's undeniable.
And to piggyback on that, Jamal, what I would tell people is there are a lot of hemp bills that are, currently under consideration across this country. And in fact, before I got on just today, I was reading the hemp bill that's being proposed here in Florida. And they are allowing, folks to, continue selling and retailing CBD products and so on to the end of this year. And then after the end of this year, you're going to have that FDA approval if it's for, human consumption and so on. But again, now is the time to be positioning yourselves for when all of that happens. And you have to be, very cognizant of the laws. You have to understand what's happening in your state. You have to pay attention to announcements. Our Commissioner of Agriculture just last week mentioned that, as of right now, they have no intentions on really doing any large scale, clamp down on the whole CBD market, but that they will be at some point taking a look at what the FDA guidances are and then issuing their own guidances and beginning to, crack down. So again,
that's based on that's based on the FDA and the Department of Agriculture, because what they're going to do, and I can preemptively see them taking all the rogue seed growers and rogue farmers and consolidating these guys in the Department of Ag. And then that's how it's going to be federally legal. So if you're getting state right now, you should be okay with those guidelines, because the initial person that had already fathered those seeds and or was in state guidelines is going to be grandfathered in with that. So as long as you're buying stuff from a credible source, your dispensary or whatever that you set up today can roll on and perpetuate, as long as you're buying stuff that's been state certified, because then obviously it'd be a conflict of interest that the state itself is certifying seed that says it's FDA unapproved. It's just not plausible for that. So it'll be a simple continuation, but it'll be more of like, let's reaffirm that we're buying reputable stuff, from the source.
So you guys, just to break it down, the Farm Bill with the hemp provision allow the states now to create their own framework of how that's going to be administered in each state, correct? So that's why it's so important that if you go to your state, you can go to your state website for your government state. So if you're in Georgia, just put in Georgia state government. It should come up, and you could just put in the search engine hemp bill, and it'll pop up where you'll be able to find the bill and read it and see what they're proposing and see what's going on. The Department of Agriculture is going to have a strong hand in this, overseeing this. Make yourself known. Ask some questions. Call. Ask them to put you on the list if there's any feedback, any type of updates that come out. You want to be on that list. We're going to be talking about how to form cooperatives. We're going to be talking about education on the hemp side. And that's a whole nother animal outside of cannabis. So I know you guys we're talking about cannabis cultivation, but the hemp side is just, it opens up the field so wide right now. Do you guys think it's starting the hemp bill, is it starting to interfere with the sale of cannabis from a medical standpoint, or change the dynamics, or what do you think?
I personally have not seen a slack off. The only thing that I've seen that hurts cannabis sales is the overproliferation of licensing. You know, when they don't do demographic studies and feasibility studies, when they irresponsibly say, hey, let's go ahead and issue 500 licenses, and then that doesn't create a dream for everyone. It just creates an unachievable reality, because no one's going to be able to achieve all the success they want. And then so the state fears, hey, we're going to be sued if we don't give them this license. They'll say we discriminated them. But in reality, you can only sustain a culture so much.
Makes a lot of sense. Roz, I think you're on mute.
You're on mute. We didn't hear you.
Sorry. So Joshua, just wrapping up, didn't you in Portland have the issue with the overabundance of cultivation licenses and an overabundance of product?
Yeah, the term overabundance has been used. It's hard for a guy like me to say there's ever too much cannabis, but in a sense, what was created was, like I said earlier, the barriers, and like as Jamal and Eric were speaking on, if your barriers to entry are low, and barriers to entry meaning usually monetary, if you can just go out there and buy a license for $5,000, which is low in the business world and in the cannabis world, and there's no cap, then everyone, then lots and lots of people are going to get into it, and it becomes very saturated, as Jamal was saying.
Right.
So, gosh, it kind of got lost in that.
No,
and one of the things I would also say, just to piggyback on this whole over licensure, if you will, we are already seeing in this industry where we have consolidation is happening. It's not a thing of the future.
Mergers
now.
I do remember where I was getting at. So you get the saturation, and everybody gets in wanting to do the same thing, and that's what creates kind of that over. The overabundance, and then with the laws being that everything has to stay within the state. Yes, Oregon had a whole lot of cannabis be produced, would in turn dropped our average price to probably around $3 a gram, out the door, $3 to $5. There's a lot of places though, and this is where actually I was saying earlier, where they're still getting $12, $13 a gram. And that's where people have focused their energies on being craft, or being that craft, small, but completely focusing on, a few strains that are done just to, completely by hand, completely organically, with scaling. Sometimes we end up with a product that is a little bit different than a craft product. And there's there's some debate about whether or not that means anything, but I won't get into that. You can create a very beautiful product and have a very large establishment if you're just careful on a few areas. So
you're on mute again, Roz. We can't hear you.
Crap. Okay, so last question. When you look at, of course, you sell flour and you sell by the gram or what have you. Is there any other product line that you see that's really starting to take off, or there's something that's niche that is, outside of just flour that people should be aware of or thinking about?
Oh, yes, of course. And, flour is, generally been thought of as the main product, but I've seen a lot of change in that in our state here, as well as many others. The distillates or the extracts and the concentrates have been made into, say, vape pens. I'm sure you see people, with their vape pens, but here they're very common, and a lot of people choose those over flour, where they can have a battery and a thing and carry it around with them discreetly. You don't have to light up flour and create a plume of smoke necessarily. There of course you can have, but so things like that, as well as topicals, have actually, there's a market for topicals and the utilization of the whole plant as a solution rather than just smoking the flower and throwing the rest out. So there's definitely a market. And what I've also seen is people create that for themselves. There's a woman that has a topical company here that, she's just created a wonderful business for herself. And she kind of created that market need. She created a little bit of hype and some good packaging and networking, and through all that, know your market, so I think there's a lot of different opportunities with products that are not just flour, definitely.
As we have like hit our 2:00 mark, I have contact information up here for those who want to get in contact with us. Follow us on IG, follow us on Twitter. We have Joshua's contact information. Jamal, give us a shout out. And I apologize, brother. Tell us, if someone wants to get in contact with you, Jamal, how can they find you?
Simply, you can go on Instagram and look up Cannabis Club LA1, or you can look up AAA Genetics on the internet, or you can just simply Google Jamal Hackler. I'm the only one in the world, and you'll find me just simply that way. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. If you Google Jamal again, you'll find me. And, I've got a good following with people and love to help people. That's what we're here for. So easy access.
Jamal is our inside. He's on a new board member with InfraMM. He's our inside track guy. We plan on doing some beautiful things with Jamal. Brother, thank you for being on. Joshua, thank you for being on. You were
absolutely
awesome. And Kaya Holdings, we are going to be bringing some Black businesses to you that want to do business together, and let's make some money together.
Absolutely, okay? Yeah. We'll keep this up. I'd love to be on your program anytime you ask me on. We can even do little appearances and little educational. I'd love to help with education. Jamal and I can come together and make slides and show what value that a consultant can be of. Because I wanted to speak on that, Jamal. Thank you so much for your input, your enthusiasm. Eric, thank you so much. Roz, you're spreading the word.
You're welcome. Blessings.
Format here, and I'm happy for this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. Eric, take us home, brother.
Man, oh man. Can you believe it that we're just in February? I mean, 2019 has been cooking with smoke already, and I hope that has been the same for you all. As usual, my message to you guys: this is Friday. Go home, get some rest, love on your family, love on yourself, take some time to rest. And I got to take my own words into consideration with that. But then get up on Monday and let's hit the ground running, man. We got a lot of work to do, and thank you guys each for joining in the conversation. Thank you guys for your questions, your comments, the whole nine. Make sure next week when you come back that you bring somebody else with you. All right.
Absolutely.
Guys, life. Take care, guys.
All right.
Hey, Roz.
Yes, sir.
What did you think about maybe having Kaya Farms give us like some sort of like tour sometime, because, facility tours would be good. That would help your expand the audience.
Yeah.
He's very open. He's very receptive. And sometimes you could be in on location and maybe doing a live with you being there.
Yeah.
That's the ticket.